Good morning. We are continuing our morning devotional series looking at wisdom literature. Specifically, right now, we are talking through the book of Proverbs. Solomon, the author of Proverbs, we've talked about this, that he's writing this book to his sons, that he's leaving an account of the wisdom that he has learned, being the wisest man alive. And he's leaving this account to his sons. And up until this point, in the first few chapters that we've looked at, he has been focusing on the importance of wisdom. Why is wisdom so important? Why should we seek after wisdom above all things? Before anything else, why should we seek to be wise? And so he's written about this, and now we're sort of moving, as we're jumping into chapter 5 today, we're moving into practical aspects of wisdom from Solomon. Solomon's moving on from talking about the importance of being wise to some practical advice that if you follow this, if his sons were to follow this advice, then they themselves would be wise. And the first bit of practical advice that Solomon gives his children, his sons, is the importance of avoiding adultery. It's one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery, is what God tells the Israelites. And Solomon is kind of breaking down the importance of this in chapter 5 here. Why is the first thing that Solomon seeks to tell his sons is to avoid adultery? Why is this number one? Well, if you look at his life, Solomon is the child of David and Bathsheba. They had an infant son before Solomon who died. And that son, the son of David and Bathsheba, was the offspring of their adultery. David and Bathsheba committed adultery with each other, even to the point where David had to have Bathsheba's husband killed. And so because of the sin that David and Bathsheba had with each other, and in that situation, a child died. So Solomon would have been raised in a household to understand the consequences of adultery. That for his family, his father and his mother's adulterous relationship led to his father becoming a murderer. And Solomon's older brother, would have been older brother, it led to his death. So Solomon would have grown up knowing the importance of avoiding adultery. He would have grown up with the real life consequences of this. And so he writes to his sons in chapter 5, and we're going to read the whole chapter. It's 23 verses all about this, and we're going to read this, and then we're going to break it down a little bit. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion, and your lips may preserve knowledge. For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is as bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she does not know it. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to the path, far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to one who is cruel. Let strangers feast on your wealth, and your toil enrich the house of another. At the end of your life you will groan when your flesh and body are spent. You will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey my teachers and turn my ear from my instructors. And I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. Drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares? Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breasts satisfy you always. May you never be intoxicated with her love. Why, my son, be intoxicated with another man's wife? Why embrace the bosom of a wayward woman? For your ways are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all your paths. The evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them. The cords of their sins hold them fast. For lack of discipline, they will die, led astray by their own great folly. So first things first here, I don't want us to misunderstand Solomon. He is not putting the adulterous situation fully at the feet of the woman here. We have to understand this in context. He's not saying that all adultery is a woman's fault and that men should avoid women because they're the cause of adultery. You have to remember who his audience is. He's writing to his sons. Who are his sons going to commit adultery with? Women. Who are the ones that they're going to make these mistakes with? Other women. And so he's putting it in language that directly applies to who he's writing it to. You could just as easily rearrange this passage and take out the she's, the hers, the woman's, and put hims, his, and misters in there, man's. If you're preaching this or speaking this to two girls, what's the important thing to focus on here is that he's saying don't commit adultery. Because while it looks good right away, it turns bad. What looks good in one moment might not be the best thing always. It says, for the lips of the adulterous woman, verse 3 and 4, it says, the lips of the adulterous woman drip with honey, and her speech is smooth with oil, smoother than oil. This is good things. But he says, but in the end, it's bitter as gall and sharp as a double-edged sword. It's not a good thing. What looks good on the outside, being able to sleep with somebody else, might look good on the outside. This act of committing adultery, in reality, it's not. It's bad. He's explaining the evils of adultery in general. And so that just because it looks like a good thing, it's not. Reality, adultery is not good. He goes on to basically say that adultery will cause you to lose your honor and your dignity. That while it may be fun in the moment, in your old age, or as you mature past the moment, you'll regret it. And he kind of gets to the point about verse 15. And he just comes right out and he says, drink water from your own cistern. Drink water from your own well. He's saying, don't cheat. Stick to the spouse of your youth. Stick to your spouse. Don't cheat with other women. Don't rejoice in other women's bodies. Don't lust after anybody else. Don't commit adultery in any fashion. Don't lust after women or men or whatever. Focus on your bride. Focus on your spouse. Otherwise, your relationship will become a public spectacle. It says, rejoice in the wife of your youth. And he goes on and he kind of does a little bit of a graphic conversation that focus on what's yours, what's in your house, not what's outside of your house. I think this is kind of important because he understands the temptations that are out there. I mean, like I said, he was a child of adultery. And he himself is not the most faithful husband. Solomon is telling his sons to be wise in this moment. That the wise man does not commit adultery. But one thing you learn about Solomon if you study his life is that while he was the wisest man who ever lived, he knew what not to do and why we shouldn't do it and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes he was pretty stupid. He knew not to do certain things, but that didn't stop him from doing them himself. The man, Solomon, had something like 1,600 wives and concubines. That's a lot. It's a lot of wives. It's a lot of concubines. And he's preaching to his sons towards the end of his life. He's saying to them, maybe just stick with one. Don't chase after others. Stick with one. Because towards the end of his life, these wives and these girlfriends that Solomon had started to pull him away from the Father. They started to pull him towards these other faiths, towards these other religions, and he's feeling this pull, and he's feeling his heart turn from the God who had founded his kingdom, the God who gave him success, who gave him victory. And so he's writing to his sons and saying, don't be like me. Don't be like me. Don't be like your grandfather, King David. Don't commit adultery. If you are wise, if you would be truly wise, you will stick to the wife of your youth and not stray to other places, because there's nothing in those other places but disappointment, disrespect, breaking dishonor. There's nothing, while those other places, those other people, those other girls that you might lust after, he's telling his sons, while it might look good on the outside, it might seem like the fun, right thing to do, it only ends up in disgrace. It only ends up in destruction. And so the wisdom of Solomon is hard wisdom for him himself to follow. And honestly, it's hard for us today, in this day and age, to follow as well. That there's so much out there between social media. There's so much out there between all of the different everything. That whether you're a man or a woman, adultery right now is the most easy thing. Between things you can find on the internet, people you can find on the internet, adultery, it's easy. It's at the tip of our fingers constantly. And the wisdom of Solomon is saying, yeah, what feels good, what looks good in the moment, in this moment right here, those lusts, those adulterous thoughts, they might look good right now, but these are empty pools. These are like gall in the mouth. These are gross. They're not good things. That while they look good on the outside, on the inside, they're going to lead to nothing but disrespect, dishonor, and destruction. And so he warns his sons to avoid adultery at all costs, to stick to their wife, the person they've committed to, the person that they love, and focus all of their attentions on her, because she's what matters. And all of the rest of it just brings dishonor and destruction. And so I think that's good for us to remember as we continue in this series, that these are the things that Solomon's going to talk to us about, that Solomon is going to explain in his words, that the wise people avoid these things. Have a great rest of the week.